Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Common Sense with Dr. Ben Carson. I'm your host, Ben Carson. And we have Dr. Mehmet Oz. Everybody knows him. Knew him long before his stint in government. He's had just a spectacular career. And Mehmet, I want to welcome you to the show. Felt so happy that you were able to take a little bit of time out of your incredibly hectic schedule to be here with us. You've been a leader in the healthcare space before your time in government, but particularly through your work as the administrator for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. You've been a key leader in the MAHA movement, and you're working with the administration to make healthcare something that we can be proud of in this country and not slapping just a temporary bandage on the healthcare epidemic, which we've seen that happen over many decades now. Can you discuss the broken healthcare system and what MAHA initiatives are things that make you hopeful?
Ben, let me start with a truism that I know you understand well. The most expensive thing we do in American healthcare is bad quality healthcare. Because you pay someone, you often overpay someone to do a bad job. Right. Then you pay someone who's qualified to fix the problem. You got to pay them, and then you got to deal with the complications. Right. So the real opportunity that MAHA affords us, and I'm going to define it in a second, is to prevent the problem from happening in the first place. But I would argue that MAHA also extends into healthcare to help address problems when you do face them. So what is MAHA? In a word, MAHA is about curiosity, which you innately have always been in your life. And if you're curious, and remember, 80% of questions are actually statements in disguise. So most folks aren't as curious as you think they are. Secretary Kennedy is a curious person. He just wants to know the answers to all the things that you probably should have been asking about. But also when he hears the truth that's not convenient, he's courageous enough to articulate what to do about it and compassionate enough to express it the way that people might actually care.
That's very rare in government.
Yeah. And it works when you do it right, and it's risky even when you do it right. But at least you get up in the morning knowing you did your best yesterday. You want to do it again today. Part of the challenge with MAHA is that there are lots of folks who have benefited from not using MAHA in their own personal lives, or making sure their businesses can skirt what MAHA really is about. And I think for a lot of folks listening right now, if I were to say, what does it take to make it easier for you to be healthy? You'd be curious. The answer to that question is why MAHA matters. For making real food available, making sure you know what healthy food actually is, not the advertising material that's fed to us all the time visually, and unfortunately we ingest it because of that as well. The history of why we've tricked America about what real food is. Some of the directly and deliberative mistakes that have been made about recommending, for example, simple carbohydrates over fats. It turns out that the opposite was the truth, and the epidemic of obesity that happened in part because we gave people bad advice, and they took the bad advice and it made it hard for them to be healthy. Absolutely. So for the MAHA moms out there, the narrative is a more precise one. Why is it harder for me to raise healthy kids than it was for my mom to raise me? What changed? And when we start asking about toxins in the environment, or use of chemicals, maybe more than they need to be, or tricking people with bad food advice, or the advertising tools that are now used to make you think everyone requires a medication to treat a chronic illness, without first at least trying lifestyle approaches. You start to begin, you start to cobble together a picture of an America that has life expectancy that's fallen 5 years behind our brethren in Europe.
It's incredible how that's deteriorated.
Yeah. And when you and I were young men, we were equal in life expectancy to Europe. Right. And rural America's fallen even further behind. They're about 9 years behind now. So we can do better.
And we've punished our people. I mean, Brooke and I were in Pennsylvania a couple of weeks ago. We were serving lunch to the kids, and we gave them whole milk. And they were saying, wow, this is the best milk I've ever tasted. This is great, because of the myth that the fat content was harmful to them, when in fact, what's really harmful is deleting, the phosphorus and the calcium and some of the things that make cell membranes, particularly in the brain. But I'm so happy to see us correcting that now. Yep. And you've been a huge part of that. But even way before the MAHA movement, you were talking about this stuff. I was a guest on your show once. I remember it was a lot of fun. But the Trump administration recently introduced Trump RX. And can you just talk about that initiative and why it can be transformative for everyday Americans?
The president realized in the first term that we spend 3 times more for the exact same medication made in the same factory as our European counterparts have to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And he just felt that was wrong. And he tried to get his arms around it, but it's difficult and it takes some tough negotiations. So when he came into office for this term, he started calling me. And the president does tend to call, as you know,
I know,
at all hours. And he kept pushing that we would allow the American people access to the same drugs that they get in Europe at most favored nation pricing.
Mm-hmm.
So that acronym MFN, most favored nation pricing, means that no matter what they are paying in Europe, we will get to pay the same. So if you charge the Europeans more because they buying life-saving medications, we'll pay more. If they get to pay less because companies don't want to negotiate, then we get the drugs cheaper in America. Doesn't make us better,
right,
but it does deal with global freeloading, with countries taking advantage of American ingenuity and American-funded products. I mean, why would 2/3 of the profits of the drug industry be in America?
Exactly.
So the TrumpRx.gov release is to allow Americans to get access to those prices that we have negotiated. So there are 17 large companies that sort of lead this industry. The president wrote letters to them last year.
Mm-hmm.
We negotiated with all of them. 16 we have signed deals with, 1 more is coming. So pretty much everybody now is going to be on board. And they have promised that going forward, any new drugs they release will be at most favored nation pricing. They promised to give our most vulnerable populations,
Mm-hmm.
our folks on Medicaid, access to most favored nation drug pricing. And they did it voluntarily. And I emphasize that because the president did not want to hurt American ingenuity.
Right.
We don't want price controls. We don't want to tell people what they can sell for, but we want to encourage them to do the best they can selling more for a higher price overseas so we can reap the benefits back in America.
Well, it's truly amazing that the president and individuals like you and Brooke and Bobby
And you,
Marty have really, these problems have been there for decades, but no one's taking them on. And when someone does take them on, how easy it is to fix. It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
well, it's nice to have a president that doesn't take no for an answer, because you can go to your counterparties and say, guys, don't send me back to the president empty-handed. He's not going to be a happy camper, and
Right.
you'll pay the price. The other reality, of course, is, Ben,
Right.
when you have someone like the president recruiting top-tier people, you can go into battle with skilled allies. When
Absolutely.
pharmaceutical executives come to me now, they say, how did you hire Chris Klump and John
Right.
Brooks and Inma Hernandez? Like, where do these guys come from? These are world-class
Mhm.
experts who are superb negotiators and patriotic as can be. We have our $3,000 an hour lawyers. We
Right.
can't keep up with you guys because they're so dedicated, so passionate. But that's actually what it takes. And that's not just for us. TrumpRx.gov was built by a fantastic software engineer at
Right.
Carson. And Joe Gebbia, he sort of runs the National Design Institute. Joe built Airbnb.
Mhm.
So think about it. The guy who built Airbnb and colleagues are building a website that is free for the American people to use.
Yeah.
That everyone who can hear my voice before you buy medication should at least check to make sure there's not a better price out there. We will direct you to the fairest prices. And more importantly, there's transparency in the system. So everybody, employers, the insurance companies, everyone knows what the right price is for these drugs.
And it works. It's easy to operate. It's not one of these things that takes you through the labyrinth. So
Yeah.
we appreciate that. Now, you've had a fantastic education, Harvard, career, Columbia, just a storybook situation. But when is it that you first begin to realize the flaws in the healthcare system that drove you to really push for change?
The beginning of my epiphany was my wife. I was raised in a pretty traditional setup, although my parents had immigrated here from Turkey legally.
Right.
My dad was a doctor, and I'd come over when America was looking for physicians.
But Lisa was a producer.
Lisa, first off, my wife, Lisa, who a big fan of yours, and Candy's obviously, Her eyes are the ones, remember the Visine commercials? Bloodshot eyes, those are her eyes.
Is that right?
Yes. So she was making commercials and movies and acting, and she actually, is very interested in theology. She had gone to theology school for a little bit. Then we had the kids, and
her mom too.
Her mom's a minister.
Yeah.
So, and she grew up in a little church community, and in that community, she was raised by her father as a heart surgeon, a famous heart surgeon. In fact, so famous that he was the answer of a Trivial Pursuit question about which famous heart surgeon was the first to play rock music in the operating room. And he'd done the first heart transplants in America with Baking and Cooley, but he was known as just being super talented.
Wow.
That stated, when he went back home to his wife, my mother-in-law, and their 6 beautiful kids, my wife was the oldest, they had an herb garden. They used medicinal herbs for lots of their treatments. It's a church community. So they very much believe that you should use medicine, traditional Western medicine, when you really needed it, but don't overuse it. And so when I got into the family, I was granted the right to marry my wife, and I was starting my residency at the time. More and more she'd say, the things that you're talking about are believed to be true in the ivory tower, but a lot of that wisdom is not seeping outside to the average American. America's not going to get the message till you give it to them. Go share with them that they can reverse their diabetes with lifestyle alone. If it doesn't work, they can always take the insulin, but use the lifestyle approaches first. And the same thing for autoimmune illnesses, some cognitive dysfunction, folks that had cardiac problems, getting their cholesterol down. You can sprinkle a statin drug on a kielbasa, but it's not as good as skipping the kielbasa. And so that mindset began to gain some traction. And I started answering calls from media when they want to know more about why I thought these things were the case. And there was a New York Times Magazine article, I think it was called The Experiments of Dr. Oz. And it was a bit about this whole movement towards a holistic approach to healing. And that's what led ultimately to my working with Oprah. And after years of training with her, we launched my show in 2009. And I was blessed to make 13 years of programs that sought to do what my wife had challenged me to do, which is take the wisdom that as a doctor you think has merit and share it with the American people. Don't be their doctor, but tell your fans what your family would hear from you. It's a subtle difference. So you don't have to be 100% guaranteed double-blind randomized trial about a statement, but I would tell my family this because it seems to make sense to me at one level or another. And that actually catalyzed a bit of a rebellion amongst our brethren. Our fellow physicians like me and you didn't know quite how to deal with that because there is almost a religious element to our education. If you don't learn nutrition in medical school, then obviously nutrition can't be important, right? Or they would have taught it to you. They taught you anatomy and pharmacology. Those are important. And so much of what we're doing right now, when Bobby goes to the medical schools and says, you guys got to teach nutrition, and they say, well, we can't because the testing systems don't want it. And then he goes to the testing people and they say, yeah, well, no one's putting pressure on us to do that. He literally has to go to everybody. And I told Bobby when Secretary Kennedy, when we first started discussing this, I ran for student body president of my medical school class on the platform that I would bring nutrition education into the school. And in fact, that's what I did. I became student body president eventually on the same issue. If you teach young doctors about stuff that actually affects their patients and they believe that it's got some scientific merit, that you're training a generation of folks who will go out there and change the lives of their patients.
Amen. That makes a big difference. Well, COVID really did a number on the public's trust of the medical establishment. How did we work to regain that trust?
The devastation of COVID wasn't just in lost lives. It was that people should have known better, were dishonest or incomplete in their explanation of what we were doing. A lot of the rules that were not based in science, the 6-foot distance, the masks, mandatory vaccines for young people, these were errors that we are still suffering from. My biggest fight was about schools, which I did not think should be shut down. I didn't think young children were at risk. I felt that the rules around shutting schools down were influenced unduly by teachers' unions. And it's not like you have all the knowledge to make a 100% correct decision, but we weren't even debating the right issues. I think the radical transparency that Secretary Kennedy has insisted on, that the president has supported, is part of that regaining of trust. But you do have to aggressively push back on the status quo. when appropriate. Otherwise, people think, well, you're not putting America first.
Right.
And as strange as it might seem to mix MAGA and healthcare system, MAHA is a real thing. MAHA says put your people first. And it's your obligation to not compromise that. So just because it's inconvenient or untoward or there's lots of money coming in that would help grease the wheels of whatever foundation you're running, it doesn't matter. If you're not taking care of the people first, then you don't deserve to be part of the MAHA movement. And the American people have been awakened to the fraud that was foisted on them during COVID, and they're watching very carefully to see what we're going to do with some of these issues.
Well, thank you for being one of the people who's brave enough to wade into those waters. I think it's making a difference. I think we'll get back that trust faster than anybody, man. Just like the economy is springing back very quickly.
Yep.
We're going to get that trust back too. Last week, a week before that, there was some disturbing headlines about nurses and doctors who didn't want to take care of patients who are of another political persuasion. I mean, what needs to be done to make sure that patients of all political philosophies receive the benefits of good health care?
Well, Ben, you're a neurosurgeon. I'm a heart surgeon. When we cut through the skin, it used to be the adage that everyone looks the same. Well, it's true for your political persuasion as well. It should be irrelevant what someone thinks about your beliefs, and you want to be respectful of their beliefs.
Right.
So my son, when he was in beginning of medical school, they told him he had to introduce himself to his patients by his pronouns. Now, I frankly don't care that much about, you can say whatever pronoun you want, doesn't matter to me, but I don't want to push my belief system on a 80-year-old Korean War vet getting ready for heart surgery by saying that I'm a he, him. And the guy's going to be wondering, why am I bothering him? He's got more important stuff to worry about, and it doesn't sync culturally with what he's been focused on.
Right.
It's not that he's for or against it. I think that there is a benefit of being honest with each other. I learn a lot from people who I respect who disagree with me. My wife, good example, right? In my house, the prosecution never rests. You've witnessed this. But it also applies to people of different political parties. Right. If I run into a smart Democrat who's got a really good idea that we should be using, I try. Sure. In fact, at the agency, I don't know this, but I bet you that probably more people who work at CMS are Democrats than Republicans. I can't tell because my main focus is being competent.
And it shouldn't matter.
It shouldn't matter. Do your job. I will make sure I'll do everything I can to make it easier for you to do your job. In fact, that's the single biggest request I ever hear. Mm-hmm. People came into government because they feel there was a purpose to it.
Yeah.
And the ability to be of service is the driving motivation. And as long as you let them do what they came to do, then they're happy. Now, it might be they prefer to do a little less of this, a little bit more of that. It doesn't matter. They're professionals. We get to make those choices right now. But, as long as we're not telling them to break the law, they should do what they're asked to do. And they should give me honest feedback if they disagree so I can change my mind. Yeah. And that has definitely happened, where I've wanted to take a more aggressive stance and folks have said, here's 3 reasons why you're going to hurt innocent people or why it won't work anyway, or here's a better path, which is the most common thing I hear. Yeah. And they're so smart that it reinforces the adage that all of us are smarter than any one of us.
Right.
You put, a bunch of people together, forget about political persuasions and get them to solve a American problem, like keep our kids healthier. I'll take ideas from everybody.
Well, when I was secretary at HUD, there were a lot of careers who'd been there 20, 30, 40 years. And what we did when we were creating new programs is put them on the foundation of the program so that they felt engaged and ownership. And those programs continue to exist after I left because they were good programs. Yep. They helped people in a real way. And if we could all just sort of get to that point, I think a lot of this animosity might disappear. It's going to take a while because there are forces, I believe, that want to see the demise of this country. And the best way to do that, it's not militarily, they can't get us that way, but from within, destroy the unity of our country on the basis of race, age, income, political affiliation, religion, gender. And I just hope our people are smart enough to realize that they're being manipulated into thinking that they're enemies just because they disagree on something. I always say if two people agree about everything, one of them isn't necessary.
That's so good. Say that again in case folks missed it. If two people go ahead.
If two people agree on everything, one of them isn't necessary.
Well, I strongly embrace your belief that social media in particular has been weaponized by foreign countries, but malevolent figures in this country as well. And it doesn't really speak for all of us. You know, Vivek Ramaswamy put a nice op-ed out beginning of the year saying his New Year's resolution was that although his campaign would use social media, he personally wasn't going to use it to decide what was happening. And why? Because he felt that he was getting a biased feed that expressed the very edges of the political spectrum. Right? The fragments of the very far left, far right, but not actually getting a feeling of what the average American was feeling. I don't know about you, Ben, but I talked to the average American who I don't even know what their political persuasion is. They're much more optimistic about our nation than I would think just from looking at social media.
Right.
And so I think Vivek's observation is a thoughtful one, that I don't want to be too harsh on my opponents or too supportive of my allies, because I don't think it's that unified a space. What's beautiful about America is that we got a lot of people in the middle who are trying to figure out what truth looks like.
Exactly. Well, you know, what has the transition from medicine to politics been like for you?
Well, this is the best job I've ever had, in part because it takes what I learned in medicine and lets me scale it. I'll give you a good concrete example. I just gave a talk to the major society that represents federally qualified health clinics. These are primary clinics they take care of 1 in 7 Americans, 1 in 3 rural Americans. And I said, the job of a doctor that I learned early on is to give patients the truth, even if they don't want to hear it, but do it in a way where they feel lifted and supported so they can process what you just told them. We got to give bad news.
Right.
And if you do it the right way, people can process it and work with you to fix the problem. And so I use that often as a preamble to be able to say, okay, here's the 5 reasons that we're really in trouble in rural healthcare. And here's what we're going to do about it. We've got this Rural Health Transformation Fund. It's a $50 billion investment, most ambitious ever out of Medicaid and rural healthcare. It's 50% more money than ever before. And with this money, we're going to right-size the system, not just pay the bills, figure out how to get more doctors involved and nurses in rural healthcare, use technology to improve these facilities, get big hospitals to adopt small hospitals, get the governors the money so they can get decisions made about their own state where they have a better finger on the pulse. All these ideas work, but only if you can first get people to agree that it's worth making the investment of effort to fix it. And that's, I think, something that doctors do instinctively. The other thing that we do is we focus on quality. And too much of healthcare finance is about the money.
Right.
You know, I can cut costs in all kinds of fun ways, but nothing is as good as improving quality. And as we discussed earlier, you'll allow the cost to naturally go away on problems that don't exist anymore, if I can just get ahead of the issue and reduce the problems.
Well, if anybody's going to get it done, it's you. You're a doer, and I like doers. But finally, for families listening right now who feel discouraged about their health and maybe the health of their children, what gives you hope? And what practical steps would you encourage them to take starting today?
This is the best time to be alive in human history. We have the best access to the best treatments if you happen to be ill. We have the best wisdom to help you along making sure you're as healthy as possible while you're thriving in life. And you have an awareness amongst the American leadership that this is an issue that you care about. So concrete steps: eat real food that comes out of the ground, looking the way it looks when you eat it. Physical activity can be literally 20 minutes a day. You don't need to run triathlons, but 20 minutes a day will save us $100 billion in cost just from the health benefits. Focus on sleep. You can't fall asleep. You got to actually work at it. Be meticulous as you can about what goes into your kids, not just the food, but into their minds as well. And the optimism that historically has allowed humanity to thrive needs to spring forth from the creative forces of America, who are our moms. And the parents, the folks that actually know to value our next generation and will always preserve them are critical to us. And I'll leave you with one last idea. And it's based on a community that was built 12,000 years ago in southeastern Turkey called Göbekli Tepe. Potbelly Hill is the English translation. These people did something that was really amazing, and it reinforces the importance of faith. They started building temples that were designed to allow them to talk to the skies, to the heavens. And
sort of like a Tower of Babel.
Well, it wasn't quite as big as Tower of Babel, but yes, they were small. They're 17-foot high tea temples. Because they had the audacity to think they could talk to God, they began to think they might have agency to change the world around them. So they developed ways of planting crops. They began to catch gazelles and domesticate them. So it was the beginning of human civilization. I emphasize that because when you and I were young, we were told that religion came out of the bountiful lives that humans generated by being able to plant crops and domesticate animals. It's the opposite. Because of religion and a faith that there was something bigger than you, you had confidence that you could shape the world around you. Regain that confidence. God put you here for a purpose. You have agency over your future. There's things that you need to do that nothing should stop you from accomplishing. And that's why taking care of the temple of the soul, your body, is so critical.
And as you were talking about that, I was thinking, you ran for Senate, but you ended up as the administrator for CMS with much more influence over the whole country.
You sound like the president. I get that from him pretty frequently. He says, you're so lucky you lost.
Well, we're all lucky that you lost because we won. And we want to thank you for the incredible work that you're doing. And God bless.
God bless. Ben, thank you for the mentoring, for the leadership.
Thank you. And I hope you all will make sure that all your friends see this particular episode. I told you it was going to be one of the best. And talking about common sense, you heard it here today. We'll see you next time. And remember the cornerstones: faith, liberty, community, and life. See you next time.